PC gaming is expensive, and for a lot of people it's reached a point of borderline unaffordability. We've seen GPUs, CPUs, memory, and even SSDs and hard drives reach astronomically high prices. And it's in that environment, thanks to all you people who mine Bitcoin, thanks very much, that we have to look at other options. For those, particularly when you have Steam sales on a regular basis, the games are getting a little cheaper, not as much as we'd like, and that's something we've also covered in the past, which we'll link to below. Now, AMD's come up with a solution that claims to be the savior of all things PC gaming. I'm your games editor, Rishi Alwani, and with me is our head of reviews and PC components maestro, Jamshed Avari.
Hey.
And we're here to discuss Ryzen 3 and Ryzen 5 architecture. And here's what you need to know.
Okay, so what AMD has going for it compared to Intel is its power with graphics. It's the only company that does the CPU and the GPU side. Like Intel, Nvidia, essentially the best of both combined, according to AMD. So what they've managed to do is deliver a CPU with integrated graphics that is more powerful than Intel's CPU with integrated graphics. These are still very much entry-level products, but the good part is that for people who aren't going to buy a graphics card anyway, and now that is a much wider pool because of the reasons you brought up, there's a lot of people who now have another option. So again, entry level primarily, it's not going to solve everything for everybody, but it's good. It's pretty much the best that a lot of people have going for them right now.
Yeah, so if you think you're going to be able to play Kingdom Come Deliverance or even other titles like GTA 5 at maxed out 4K settings, that's not going to be the case with this rig. This is someone who's probably upgrading from a PS3 or someone who's been playing on mobile and wants a better full-fledged desktop experience. It's definitely not for someone who's already embedded knees deep into either console or PC ecosystem at this point in time.
Yeah, basically people who've always had an entry-level home PC but have never been able to play games on it, or people who've never been able to either afford a graphics card or convince somebody who can afford that, that you need, that's something you need because your PC runs, you can do, office work, you can browse the web, you can chat, you can download, watch movies, etc., etc. The one thing that you need the graphics card for is gaming. So AMD is targeting that entry-level market that can't quite afford that can't quite justify spending the money on that. And they've delivered the new Ryzen 3 2200G and the new Ryzen 5 2400G with integrated AMD Radeon RX Vega graphics. Now this is a cut-down version, a highly cut-down version of the same Radeon RX Vega GPUs that are in the Vega 56 and Vega 64 graphics cards. These are technically called Vega 8 and Vega 11, so that gives you an idea of the scale by which the capabilities have been reduced. You're right about the target audience that you said. 1080p is probably the maximum that should be targeted here. 720 even better. Again, we're looking at entry-level PCs, right? We're looking at people for whom gaming is just a little bit of a bonus, just that kind of a value add. And it's at that end of the market that a graphics card such as an NVIDIA GeForce GT 1030 would cost at the very least 6,000 rupees. So we are looking at saving that much money. We're looking at a PC that you can build absolutely bottom end of the budget scale with decent 1080p gaming quality. Most recent titles at low or medium settings. That is the target.
Yeah, so as Jamshed said, right, this is for someone who essentially is who's just coming into gaming or is fine with just getting things to run, and which is why it's very important to keep your expectations in check. If you're the sort who thinks that this is the holy grail to 1080 60 or 4K 60 with HDR, you're again not going to be able to do that. But what you do get rather is a pretty small form factor, competent piece of kit. Why don't you tell us what this is running right now, what our test rig is running?
Okay, so you don't have to go this small, but this is a Gigabyte AB350N gaming Wi-Fi motherboard, which uses the mini ITX form factor. So just for the sake of comparison, a standard motherboard would be about that big and that wide. This is Mini ITX. It's highly integrated. It's designed for very small form factor PCs. It's not very common in India. In fact, you'll find it very tough to find a cabinet and a power supply designed specifically for Mini ITX. The good news is, of course, you could put any of these CPUs into a full-size motherboard or use the small motherboard with full-sized ATX cabinets and power supplies, because everything is fully on the same level when it comes to standards. So this motherboard is super compact. As you can see, there's only one PCIe slot, so this is where a graphics card would go, and it would actually hang over the edge and stick out the back quite a bit if that's what you wanted. You have standard size DDR4 slots, but there's only 2 slots instead of 4. We'd advise you to fill both and use dual channel RAM, so you can get up to 32 GB this way. You've got integrated Wi-Fi and Bluetooth thanks to that module over here, and those are terminals for connecting an antenna, which is included in the box with this motherboard. You've got 4 SATA ports. There is also an M2 port, an M2 slot for PCIe SSDs. As far as connectivity goes, you've got 6 analog audio outputs, Gigabit Ethernet, 4 USB 3.1 Gen 1 ports, 2 USB 3.1 Gen 2 ports. That's a DisplayPort video output. There's an HDMI port below that, 2 more USB 2 ports and a PS2 keyboard mouse port, and of course those antenna terminals that we already spoke about. You can add even more USB ports. There's headers for a front panel or internal set of 2 more USB 2 and 2 more USB 3.1 Gen 1 ports. The disappointment here is that there's no Type-C. There's no Type-C and there's no optical SPDIF audio output.
Yeah, and I mean, to be honest, that's not too much of a loss when you consider who this is made for, because I mean, optical out for audio and I mean Type-C are essentially at this stage still pretty much, I mean, at least by Indian standards, sadly, pretty much as premium features.
Sure. So if you are building ITX for use as like a home theater PC or a small unobtrusive living room PC that could just live very quietly and simply next to your TV, you might want that optical audio out. That's what you're not going to get. But you do get HDMI and DisplayPort, and as you can see quite clearly, there is no graphics card, and this is our DisplayPort connection to our monitor over here. All graphics being handled on the chip right here.
Yeah, and Jamshed, tell us a little about the RAM this is running, because this is one thing you have to keep in mind. While this seems to be a pretty small setup and the cost, the entry cost might seem on the cheaper side. So that's something to keep in mind, that while the entry cost, if you think about it, you're essentially getting a GPU plus CPU for that price, which is a lot cheaper than an i5 at this stage, or even
an i3
yeah, exactly.
plus like that GTX 1030, which would be the logical alternative to this.
Yeah.
So yes, you're right that RAM is very important for the simple reason that the GPU is on board and it doesn't have VRAM of its own. There is no GDDR5 or HBM RAM as there would be on a standard graphics card. So you're actually dropping all your assets into main system RAM, and you can choose within the BIOS how much of that to block off. 1 or 2 GB is generally standard. The higher the speed the RAM, the better. In this case, we're using G.skill DDR4 3200. That might be expensive. That's the one component right now that you can't do anything about the cost, and because you're using some of your RAM for graphics memory, we'd say a minimum of 8 and a recommended amount would be 16 GB for system RAM for a build like this.
How much RAM are we using on this machine? Right?
16 GB.
16. So that's another thing to keep in mind, because if you look at RAM prices for this kind of RAM, you're looking in the range of around 7,000 or 8,000 for just an 8 gig stick. And that's something to keep in mind as well. So while it might seem as one of the as a cheaper alternative, it's still not relatively as cheap as it could be. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And in terms of the motherboard, while we do have a 350N from Gigabyte, there are other options from the Micro ATX range, such as those from Asus and MSI, as well as Gigabyte. The Micro ATX ones are in the range of 4,000 to 5,000 rupees. Okay. So that's another thing to keep in mind.
Two more things to really mention over here are that this uses AMD's B350 chipset, or platform controller as it's more properly called. The B350 is mid-range. It's not the highest end you can go. And the choice was made over here to go with that one because we're not going to overclock. These are not CPUs that are really designed primarily for overclocking for that enthusiast market. And you basically get everything that you need without spending that much. That would come into play if there was, say, a Ryzen 7 version of this, but there isn't. There's only the Ryzen 3 and the Ryzen 5.
For now.
For now, yes. The other thing to talk about is price. You could expect to spend about 6,000 to 7,000 rupees on a standard mini ATX motherboard. This particular one costs about 9,000 rupees. It's also not very, very easy to come across in India. It costs 9,000 rupees, number one, because of the size, number two, because you've got integrated Wi-Fi, and number three, because it isn't that popular. It is a niche product, but we're using it here today to illustrate really where one of these processors could fit in, where it could really shine.
Yeah, and on the topic of this processor shining, we even checked it out on a bunch of games. In fact, there is a detailed review on the site. So we're going to just run them right now so you get an idea of what to expect. Yeah, let's do that.
Please.
So Overwatch is one of the more popular games in India right now. Shout out to the Overwatch community who has been super active across all forms of social media. So we're checking it out right now. As you can see, we've got fraps as well as its own detailed options there. Don't even mind my player rank. I play mainly on consoles. So we're going to take this right into quick play mode so that you have an idea of what to expect in real-time use. There's a bit of a change. There's a bit of a difference between what we've seen in frame rates when you're playing in practice mode versus what you get when you're playing in an actual real match. So we're checking out on skirmish right now. The settings here are a mix of high and medium, particularly in terms of texture quality, texture filtering. Anti-aliasing has been kept to its lowest option, FXAA. And it looks pretty good. To me, at least as someone who plays quite often on console, this is pretty much on par with the PS4 version. Frame rate, yeah, I mean, you're getting around 30 FPS, 33 FPS. We were able to get a lot higher by reducing settings to low. We were able to get around 65 to 70 frames per second in most maps, even in the most busy circumstances.
But and this is full HD. You could also just go down to 720 and keep some of the settings.
Yeah. But honestly, that's not something we'd recommend because it looks really horrible in comparison.
Sure, but again, we're talking about people for whom gaming is a bonus when they buy their entry-level home PC.
But it's super pixelated and it looks like you have glaucoma vision. So we would not recommend that option. We'd recommend turning a few things up, particularly because it's still very much playable around 39, 40 FPS.
Yeah, but let's also just clarify that right now we're using a 4K monitor and the game is running at 1080p.
Yeah, and as you can see, there's a minor stutter there, which is...
So at the heaviest parts of the action, it did stutter quite a bit. So you might want to tweak the settings, go into the advanced settings and tweak individual parameters. Yeah, so that's something which we're going to show you right now. We are going to look into the graphics quality, advanced, and we're probably just going to turn something else down. We're probably going to turn refraction quality low and apply that. And we should see a slightly better performance now, at least in the heavier parts. But by and large, you can look at the frame rate in the upper left corner over there.
Yeah, and it's a little more steady now. But that's something to keep in mind that you're looking, with a build like this, you'd want consistency. More than an actual straight 60 FPS, you'd want consistency in frame rate.
Absolutely.
And as you saw right now, even in a heavier scene right now, we are able to keep that 30, 35 FPS. It was still quite playable. There was no drop.
So the trade-off, of course, is cost. If you're a super serious gamer, if you're super concerned about quality, you've got to pay. You've got to spend a little bit of money on a decent system. But this is a sort of a new middle ground. This is a balance that between cost and quality that hasn't existed before.
Yeah, at least in the PC space, it hasn't for the longest time. And you're getting pretty good image quality. You're getting, surprisingly butter. I wouldn't say butter, more like a palpable performance at this stage. It's not exactly painful. It's playable. And now we're being joined into an actual game from a skirmish match. So, let's see if there's any differences here. There shouldn't be from our experience, but let's take a look anyway. In terms of actual performance across the board, we've seen some differences, at least with the Junkertown map, where the frame rate was at best case 40-45 FPS, dropping down to around low 30s, worst case. But that was before we fiddled with the settings, and as you can see, we're seeing around a spike around 5 FPS, which is not too bad, all things considered.
And you wouldn't be able to get anywhere near this level of performance with Intel's integrated graphics solutions on its current, even on its current 8th gen CPUs, 8th gen core CPUs. Although with Intel, you do get integrated graphics on every single CPU. There's no question about whether or not you do or don't get graphics capabilities, whereas on the AMD side of things, it's only these two new models, the Ryzen 3 2200G and the Ryzen 5 2400G. What you need to look for is that G on the end of the name and a silver band across the gray and orange retail box, which is otherwise pretty much the same as the standard non-graphics Ryzen 3 and Ryzen 5 CPUs.
Yeah.
So the point that we keep coming back to is that it's about the balance. It's about the balance of what you can expect at a price point, which is more than you would have been able to get at this price point before.
Yeah, that's exactly.
It's somewhat of a niche audience, because if you were going to spend on a graphics card anyway, even if it was that absolute low end of the scale where you're buying a Radeon RX 550 or a GeForce GT 1030, you'd probably be better served with an Intel CPU, because pure CPU performance on its own, Intel does put in a better performance.
Yeah, and as Jamshid was talking, we switched down the resolution and the settings to medium, the medium preset, and as you can see, we're getting a much higher frame rate, and that doesn't tend to dip too often in heavier scenes. So I mean, yeah, and I mean, right now even at medium, looks okay.
Yeah,
not as bad as it was at low.
I'm not a super serious gamer, and I wouldn't be upset with this at all. I wouldn't feel like I was missing too much.
Yep.
Oh, there was some stutter. Yeah. Shall we move on?
Yeah, in a second. I just got revived. So yeah. Yeah, but as you can see, like, yeah, in its busy sections, it's able to hold a little better than what it was at a high. That's one thing to keep in mind. And yeah, as you can see, Overwatch is pretty much playable at this juncture. So we're going to move on to the next game, which is, I think, one of the most played games in the country. So now we're going to be checking out Counter-Strike Global Offensive. And as you can see in the video settings, we're looking at 1080p, full screen mode, obviously, and we're going with the defaults, whatever it is defaulted to. And yeah, let's take a look at this. Let's just find a game. All right, we're in. Right now we're just spectating as the match is already in progress. So, yeah.
Yeah, so it is dipping below 30.
Yeah. So we're seeing some minor, I mean, that minor dip was there, I guess, due to the fire effects on screen. Now we're in game, and let's see what you could normally expect with this. Oops. Yeah, as you can see, there's a bit of a dip when you have effects on screen, but otherwise it seems to keep its standard 60 FPS for most parts of gameplay. But yeah, once you have effects in, it does take a dip. Let's see what we can do with a slightly lower video setting. All right.
Take the AA down.
Yeah, is that? Yeah.
It's 8x right now.
Disable. Let's disable the AA. Okay. All right. Now we're back in. Yeah, died while we were changing that. So, yeah. What? Okay then. So yeah, that just happened. We got in game and we got sniped. Like in most games of Counter-Strike. Okay then. So yeah, whenever effects come on screen, we do see a dip. It's not exactly the best case situation, but let's see how this older game plays now that we've reduced a few other things in the next round. All right. Flashbang, and yeah, still manages to hold above 30.
Not just above 30, we're above 60.
Yeah,
quite a lot of the while.
Yeah, quite a lot of the while. But yeah, once effects are on screen, you do see a dip.
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, that's essentially what you can expect with Counter-Strike. I think I'm pretty much done embarrassing myself playing this game. And I think let's move on to the next one of the bunch. So, yeah. All right, start now. So Doom is one of those titles that's been optimized to hell and back for AMD hardware.
Yeah, so it runs right now. You can see the overlay to the right of the screen. It's running in Vulkan, which is something that favors AMD.
Yeah, so as you can see, I mean, you're getting a steady 40-45 frames per second. But again, like in most things with Doom, also it'll be interesting to see what you get when you're in a very busy section.
Which we are just about to hit.
Yep. Because, I mean, as we saw with Counter-Strike and as we saw with Overwatch, while it did keep to a very acceptable frame rate most of the time, when things got busy, we saw some variance. Here there is some variance, you're not getting 40, you're getting closer to 30.
But it's
dipping down
good
to 28.
enough. This is full HD with, we'll just dip into the settings and show you exactly what we are running.
Yeah, so, and it looks quite good. I think, yeah, I mean, this is near console quality, if not more so, at least from our experience. At least base PS4, Xbox One. Definitely not the Switch. That's a lot. That's basically sub HD.
Yeah, I mean, well, we weren't going for that comparison anyway, were we?
No. I mean, it's a budget PC to a degree. So, yeah.
Ooh, did I get it? Yes.
So, yeah, as you can see, we're able to keep a pretty respectable frame rate.
Frankly, I'm happy. You know, it's not great. It's obviously not the highest possible settings, but there's not everybody that can even tell the difference.
Yep.
Ooh, well done. Another. Okay.
So yeah, as you can see, it dips down to like the high 20s, 28, 29. But that aside, it's more or less pretty stable at whatever we're getting.
You know what? Let's just... Oh no. Okay.
I mean, even if you look at the weapon detail, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not exactly you know, a point of concern. Neither do the enemy models for that matter.
I mean, this is pretty much as heavy as action gets. Anywhere in the game up to this point, this is the level of action that we've seen. See that?
Yep.
Ooh. If you can do stuff like that without losing
too much,
you know, without lagging, and there hasn't been any disruptive lag, right?
No, there hasn't been any. I mean, so far so fluid. Perhaps the most fluid of the bunch right now.
Pretty much, but it is a very forgiving game. We started out by saying that, especially so on AMD. This game runs so well on even the most basic hardware.
Why don't you hop into the settings and tell us what we're running this at?
Let me just kill this one first, because that's okay. Settings, video.
Yeah, as you can see, we're at 1080p,
1080p.
VSync off, anti-aliasing off, motion blur at medium, and chromatic aberration on with a field of view of 90.
If you go into the advanced settings, you'll see that essentially we're using the low preset and Vulkan as the API rather than DirectX. But even at low, looked pretty good, looked good enough, and it was, it was fun.
Yeah, it's quite respectable even at the low preset, and quite playable too.
Oh,
so that's
hey, there was a
something
cord
to note.
damage.
So yeah, this is what you can expect with Doom. Pretty much low, but at 1080p and at a surprisingly respectable image quality and frame rate.
Oh yeah.
So what do we have next to test?
Let's try Far Cry. Far Cry is always fun.
So up next we have Far Cry 4. It's a game from 2014, but it's still one of the more taxing open world games, particularly on PC, and it's been a mainstay of a lot of our tests. So yeah, I mean, while the new one's coming out later in March, March 27 to be precise, it'll be interesting to see how that holds up versus Far Cry 4, which is been one of our long time games for testing.
So one of the things that people believe when they can only afford low-end hardware is that they're sort of consigned or condemned to play only previous generation games. Now that's not necessarily such a bad thing. If you don't play that much or that often, there's a huge number of really, really good, really fun games. And we achieved a level of quality a while ago where you're not missing much.
Yeah, you're not.
You can play good games. You can be the gamer. You can have fun.
Because I mean, like stuff like Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas would run perfectly fine on this hardware. Other games like The Witcher 2 would also be pretty decent to play as well. And even probably Deus Ex Human Revolution, to name a few. So you're not going to be missing out too much with this, provided you're willing to keep your expectations in check. All right.
Yeah. Okay, so while reviewing this hardware and going through the games many times, we tried a lot of different settings. And here's what we arrived at for video. Full HD, 60 Hz, VSync off obviously, and low graphic settings. It's basically, low is the preset that really takes care of everything. There's nothing, there are no individual settings to worry about, no jargon or terminology.
Yeah, though you could go into the advanced settings, you just press escape for a second.
Yeah.
There is an option to go into quality settings, sorry, not advanced, quality settings, and to essentially mess around with this as you can see fit. But as you can see, we're running the low preset where you have details like ambient occlusion, anti-aliasing, water, environment, and even motion blur turned to low or in some cases off. So that's something to keep in mind, that this is the kind of performance you can get.
Yeah, so I mean, it'll play well. It's not going to be as visually breathtaking or pretty. You're not going to have some of the light effects like when you turn into the sun. You're not going to see all the detail on the fur. But that's the trade-off that we made for the frame rate, which as you can see is in the high 30s. So very little tearing, and we can move around without any problem. Let's steal this car. Whoops, sorry. No.
So yeah, as you can see, it's still balanced.
We're still in the high 30s.
So keep in mind, there is nighttime in the game when there's less effects, and we're not into any firefights just yet.
But we'll get there. So, well, because as you said, this is an open world, we'll have to head to a place which triggers a daylight cycle. Actually, I could have gone back and just slept, no?
Yeah, like, or you could just, yes.
Oh, no,
there we go.
Please. Let's get out of here. Oh, we have a mounted gun. Excellent. Goodbye.
So you're still sticking around the 30, okay, spoke too soon now, the 25, 30
small
FPS mark, but yeah.
Let's get out of here, heal ourselves.
So as we saw earlier, Far Cry 4 was in a nighttime state, so it obviously looked a lot more, I mean, it also could mask some of the game's more possibly jarring issues.
And here
but now,
we have,
during the day, there's a surprising amount of detail on the foliage, on the grass, despite it being at just low settings.
So you can see that moving in the wind. This is low, right? This is 1080p low. So we're missing fur effects. Let's try and find some friendly animals. And we're obviously missing the God rays,
Yeah.
which is a specific setting that we saw was turned off. So, on much better hardware, you'd be able to see some pretty neat effects with the sunlight interacting with the snow and peeking out from between surfaces.
Yeah, but despite that, thanks to strong art direction, and
Light,
it actually does look
yes.
pretty good. It's pretty much I mean, this is an acceptable level of performance for a lot of people, in my opinion. So yeah, I mean, yeah, as you can notice, there's some minor pop-in of elements, but that's always been the case with Far Cry games. So yeah.
There really won't be much fighting on this part of the map.
Yeah, but even then, we're still able to stick to around 30,
So you
35
can see
FPS mark.
minor artifacts,
Yeah.
very minor stuttering.
Yeah, and that's bound to happen considering you have a lot more grass, you have a lot more
textures
popping in. That's bound to happen. But even then, it's still pretty okay. I mean, there isn't too much to complain about,
Right?
particularly as an entry-level option.
Yeah, so we're still talking about a 13,000 rupee processor with integrated graphics here, the Ryzen 5 2400G. We're still talking about a system that you do not have to spend money on for a discrete graphics card.
Yeah, and you can even go cheaper if you decide to go with the 2200G. But and then there are some performance penalties.
There will be. You won't get quite the same experience if you have a little money to spend, because the difference is only a few thousand rupees, like less than 3,000 rupees.
Okay. So right now we're going to try liberating an outpost and see how much of a hit your frame rate will take. And yeah, we're going in guns blazing so that there are more enemies on screen and you can see exactly how much of a load you can expect. And as you can see, it holds up quite respectably. I mean, so far it's in the mid 30s, late 20s.
It's gone dark again.
Yeah, that's fine.
Or is that just me because I'm dying?
Possibly. But yeah, I mean, as you can see in terms of frame rate, it managed to hold up decently. In fact, more so than the last two games. But yeah, I mean, this is what you can expect with Far Cry, essentially.
Oh,
there we go. So yeah, with an excess amount of effects on the screen, this too does take a hit to like
just
the
like me.
Low 10s. And yeah. So yeah, this is pretty much what you can expect with Far Cry. Pretty decent experience overall, unless it gets too busy. And I mean, that's pretty much in common with what we've seen with the other games as well. So I think we should move on to our final game in the test bench.
Sure.
Yeah. So we're going to be checking out Grand Theft Auto 5 here. It's one of the more popular releases. It hit PC, I think, in mid 2015, and it was one of the more interesting releases because it got a lot of people to upgrade their machines. And now let's see what this classic has in store for us on a machine of this magnitude or lack thereof. So as you can see, we're just loading into the story mode, which is, I'm guessing, what most people end up playing anyway, at least in India, versus the online mode, which is online and multiplayer and chock full of microtransactions. So yeah, we're here and
okay. So let's just run around for a sec before I talk about the settings, because there's something fairly interesting to see. So basically that's us, high 30 FPS, yeah, mindless violence. Let's try and steal something. Excellent. So yeah, still in the high 30s. Note that everything on screen is slightly jaggy. There we
Yeah.
had a slowdown. But we're not doing too badly in terms of things like textures.
Yeah, it
Popping.
seems to look pretty acceptable. There doesn't seem to be any major concern in terms of visual quality at least. And while there do seem to be a few dips in frames,
Yeah.
let's see what exactly happens when you... Wow,
There.
that was huge. So yeah, there are some dips in frames, but let's see how it goes when you actually have a 5-star rating and have all the cops on you.
Oh, shall we do that then?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's see what happens.
Shall we cause some mayhem?
Yep, because yeah, daytime of Los Santos looks pretty decent.
Yeah.
I'm still getting pretty decent God rays and lighting effects, and some minor
Yep.
reflections,
Look at that.
which is not too shabby at all. And we're also seeing like we're also seeing a little. I mean, some of the simulation elements, yeah, do is
Now you
essentially
can see
drop.
this because of the lighting effects in
Yeah.
this scene.
Yeah, so some of the simulation elements of this game do tend to make it drop a bit, as we could see a little there and even here. So,
Shall we get some cops in?
yep.
Okay.
And now we've managed to alert the cops.
Do you want to see brutal?
Let's see what happens now when they start chasing you.
Hi. There we go. Perfect.
Yeah. So as you can see, like GTA 5 is one of those games that's known for its cop AI, which is pretty relentless. And though they did fix that quite a bit with its PS4 and Xbox One and PC releases, it still is quite brutal to deal with. And even then, with I think a couple of cop cars chasing us, it seems to keep us stable enough frame rate.
Control, on the other hand, is...
Yeah, I mean,
well,
this is a
that's
game
probably
that's built for a controller, in my opinion. And yeah, there we go, slow down. So, I mean, I think from everything we've played so far, this is perhaps the most demanding game of the bunch in terms of performance. I mean, as you can see, we've seen more frequent dips here than on Counter-Strike or Overwatch or Doom.
So obviously the structure of the game is different. We've got much more fast-paced action, much more potential to really let loose and, you know, force the scenery to keep up with us.
Yeah, and plus it's also a game that depends heavily on physics, depends heavily on simulation elements. There's a lot more going on in the game world, which does essentially mean you are going to see a bit of a dip.
There we go. That was another one. Oh, but hey.
Yeah, as you can see...
We're doing fairly well. We're still doing fairly well. So there are interruptions in the game experience, like, you know, as we said, consistency is more important than anything else.
Exactly.
But I think this should be... Oh dear. Okay, this should be a fair estimation of quality. Let me go into the settings and show you what I was talking about. Okay, so over here, this is where GTA 5 tries to basically guess the kind of hardware you have and choose settings that are appropriate to you. So we started out at 720 for the resolution and basically everything everything set to the absolute minimum. Oh, sorry, where were we? Here.
So we're at 1080p.
Yeah, so everything was off when we started. Everything was set to the absolute minimum. No AF, no AA, nothing. And then we started bumping things up and using the game's built-in benchmark, and we got great results. So we said, okay, there's got to be some margin here for improvement. So we bumped things up, still got good results, bumped things up. And then we came up to a point where we had settings that consumed the entire 1 GB of pre-allocated RAM. As we said in the beginning, you've got system RAM, but 1 or 2 GB of that, depending on your BIOS settings, will be allocated, hard allocated to the graphics and cut off from the rest of the system. So GTA 5 thinks that's all we've got to work with, ignoring the fact that once that is full and it spills over to system memory, it's basically the same pool. It's the same latency, it's the same distance, you know, from the CPU. So you can hit this over here, which is ignore suggested limits and just keep pushing things up. So as you can see, it is now telling us that the demand on the system will be pretty much double of what we've got, but it still ran just fine. We could still push this up further. So FXAA, medium settings over here, high, normal, 4x anisotropic filtering.
Yeah, and plus high ambient occlusion and tessellation.
Yeah, so that was reflected in those light effects that we saw earlier. I would call this pretty good. I would call this a win.
I don't know. I mean, with the drops, I wouldn't think so.
With the drops, correct.
And I mean, that's something we should let. I mean, that's the beauty and flexibility of PC gaming, right? You can switch to, you can switch around and configure things to your liking. Though I do feel that if you go straight on medium, you should be able to get a lot better in this.
Yeah. So I mean, we were still trying to see how far we could go with this. Obviously, it could do depending on your priorities. It could do with a bit more tweaking. Now, GTA 5 also does not rely on blanket presets. You have to go and tweak everything individually. But, you know,
I mean, which is what it should be. Ideally, every game should allow you to do that.
But presets are a good starting point. Then you can start customizing.
Only if you're adverse to reading. But
well, I mean, I'm looking at an entry level.
Still, I mean, I agreed. But then at the end of the day, I think if you look, if we keep everything down to medium, as Jamshed said, you could see a much better performance.
Oh yeah.
So that's one thing to keep in mind. That this was running with pretty much a mix of medium and high. If you went straight to medium, you could do a lot.
Yeah. So who would have thought this just a little while ago? Integrated graphics, no GPU, no money being spent on that, and you can play these games. They're not the latest. They're not the greatest. They're clearly not running at their own highest potential. But it's certainly better than solitaire.
Oh yeah, I do agree. And if you actually think about it in terms of costing, a machine of this magnitude would essentially cost you just about 40,000 rupees. That is if you include the 2400G. You could spend a little less and get a 2200G, but
you could also spend a little less and get a smaller SSD. We've been playing off an SSD over here, by the way.
Yeah.
So that is our Samsung 860 EVO, brand new SSD, excellent in terms of price. It's a workhorse. That's an Antec 850 watt power supply, which is overkill for the system.
Yeah.
But again, fully standards compliant. You can choose what you like. And of course, our Asus 4K monitor.
Yeah. So like honestly, if you're looking to build something like this, as I said, it would be around 40K. That would be obviously going with a lower end motherboard. That would be going with a lower end power supply. In terms of an SSD, we're looking at 256 gig SSD for a machine of that.
That's pretty much where you should aim for if you are a gamer. You can obviously get away with less, but we're looking at having a whole bunch of games which are like 40 to 60 gigs
that's
on your SSD.
Exactly. And also another thing to keep in mind when I'm giving you a 40,000 price point, that also includes 8 gigs of RAM, not 16. And this is obviously the more expensive spec'd out 3200 megahertz variety. And that's that's something to keep in mind. So 40,000 is what you could end up paying for a machine of this spec.
Yeah, so we're looking at 6,000 to 7,000 for a motherboard. You have your choice of Asus, Gigabyte, MSI, and ASRock in India. 6,000 to 7,000, we would recommend the B350 chipset. You could go X370, but we're sort of assuming that people won't want to upgrade over here.
Or the other option is you can even go on the lower end and pick up a B320. That's another option as well. Though, I mean, as Jamshed said, you'd rather stick with the 350 due to a better feature set.
Yeah, that's basically where we are in terms of a mainstream reliable PC, which has some legs in it, which will go for a couple of years.
Yeah, and also keep in mind that due to the flexibility of PCs, you can it's not like you're stuck at 40,000 and this is the kind of performance you can get. You can also add a discrete GPU, as in its own standalone GPU, something you can add later down the line. And that also will improve performance to a large degree.
Yeah, but then we're looking at spending another roughly 20,000 rupees on just the GPU, because in order to have a jump that is justified, you need to be looking at something like a GTX 1060.
Yeah, and
you could do a GTX 1050 for less than that, but the way that prices are going right now, it doesn't seem to be really worth it. It's not going to be worth it for the degree of improvement you get compared to this.
Yeah, that's another thing to keep in mind. So this is essentially a good foundation build, a good starter build in a lot of ways. And it just goes to show that, as time has worn on in terms of tech availability, while some of us have our own, while some of us have our own predetermined ideas of what it should be like, 4K 60, 1080p 60, this goes to show that there is a possibility of innovation on the lower end of the spectrum. Now, to be honest, with Ryzen 5, I do see the 1080p dream dead. But I do feel that there is potential for it to be resurrected with once pricing of the components around it come back in check.
What do you mean the 1080p dream?
The 1080p dream of playing games at 1080p maxed out, or 1080p at least at medium settings at a fluid frame rate. It's getting there. It's not there yet. It's getting there.
Very nearly there.
But yeah, that's something to keep in mind. I mean, this is something for someone, like I said, to keep your expectations in check.
Yeah, so if you want that home PC, but you want to get a little bit of gaming in, but you don't want to spend on a graphics card, you're good to go. If you want the PC for your living room, which will be connected to your TV and get a controller and play a little bit casually, you're good to go.
And also keep in mind the 40,000 price point we're referring to does not include the OS, does not include
monitor, keyboard,
or
and mouse.
Yes.
Yeah.
So those are separate expenditures.
Yeah. We're not recommending a cabinet or a power supply specifically. Actually, the power supply we can. For something like this, if you're not going to get a graphics card, you're good with 500 watts. Even that is very, very generous.
Yeah, I mean, I think personally, I feel 500 watts around a GPU is overkill. You could even go lower to like 400,
430.
Yes.
Yeah.
That would actually make more sense for a build of this kind. And also in terms of cooling, what does it actually ship with?
This comes with AMD's own Wraith Stealth cooler, which is pretty compact, but it's good enough if you're not going to overclock. And we wouldn't really recommend overclocking on something like this. It's an excellent value just to get something like this in the board, and it's in the box. And it's quick and simple and very easy to set up. So you've got your CPU, you've got your motherboard, your RAM, your cooler, your SSD, power supply. In terms of the cabinet, that is extremely subjective. So we are not going to make any specific recommendations. If you're looking at a mini ITX thing like this, you've got restricted choices. There's a couple of models from Bitfinex and 1 or 2 models each from Cooler Master and Corsair floating around in the market.
And though there will be more options as the year wears on, as fractal
Hopefully.
design is also going to be available here. So that's another option to look at. But by and large, as Jamshed said, on the mini ITX front, you're going to be bottlenecked. On the micro ATX, you have more options.
Yeah, and you can spend anywhere from 2,000 to 20,000 on the cabinet alone. So I think we'll leave that to your subjective judgment. Keyboard and mouse, exactly the same thing. It's ultimately just a matter of your comfort. So please choose whatever you want. And for monitors, we're using a 4K monitor over here where we run all our games at 1080. But you could enjoy movies and things like that if you want to buy a 4K monitor, and it'll run perfectly fine. Or you can get a much more affordable 1080p monitor, which I think is what most people would be comfortable with in terms of size, in terms of cost.
Yeah, we're looking at something around 7 or 10,000 on a 1080p display.
You can go more than that.
Yeah,
you can definitely go more than that.
But we're talking about a 21, 22-inch display would come in that price range. That's one thing to keep in mind. Also, I mean, if you look at your options in that range of around 30 to 40,000, your options essentially, aside from this, is the PS4 Slim, which is based on cutting edge tech from 2014, and you're looking at the PS4 Pro, which is at 41,990, is another option. But then keep in mind, with those options, you'll be spending on games. You're looking at 3,499 upwards for a game.
Yeah.
But
versus a few hundred on the average Steam sale.
Yeah. So that's the thing. The advantage with PC isn't Steam itself, but Steam sales. They're frequent. They're often enough that to blunt any possible wallet damage you might expect. So, I mean, so if you're the sort who doesn't mind playing games that are a couple of years older, if you're the sort who wants something just to dip in and dip out in terms of an experience, this is worth considering. Because combined with Steam sales, combined with sales on GOG, you can end up spending a lot more less than what you'd spend on console if you buy during sales, and if you're not the sort to buy into the hype of pre-ordering, which is something we don't recommend at Gadgets 360.
And combined with what I said about low-end gamers playing older titles, you can get some phenomenal deals. Really, you can get just a couple of $100, for games that would have been 3,000, 4,000 rupees a year or 2 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, like The Witcher 3, for example, gets frequently discounted. Now I think it was like under a fraction of what it cost at launch. And same situation with Nier Automata, which had a 50% off during a Square Enix publisher sale. So there are options as long as you're willing to not go for the latest and greatest, which is what we wouldn't recommend anyway.
Yeah.
So with this kind of rig, yeah, as long as you keep your expectations in check, it could end up being a very good budget option, and not just for someone who wants to dabble in esports like Dota, or Counter-Strike, or Overwatch, but for other games as well. So that's where we'll leave it at. And thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching this. Hit the notification button if you want to see more of this. Check out our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and even check out our weekly gaming podcast called Transition, where we talk in depth about the world of gaming and what to expect on a weekly basis. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.